As you have refused to come to the encampment, we are now bringing the encampment to you.
I think inflation has gone slightly up. It was at 9% when I came in.
Ladies, no! I am Hulk!
Anti-Israel protests on college campuses are escalating to dangerous new levels. Biden double lies about inflation, and a TikToker complains about microaggressions in her gym class. All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode of Brad vs. Everyone, my daily series where I take on the craziest and cringiest ideas from across our politics and the internet, from a center-right, independent perspective. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and sticking around. We're growing really fast, and I would love to have you be a part of this community. And if you're a returning viewer, you know what I'm going to say. Even though I will try not to repeat it too much in this episode, don't forget to hit that like button and do comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Now, before we get into our serious business for today, I want to talk to y'all about a hilarious story that just shows how America has fallen and why we can't have nice things. So basically, they had this really cool idea for this artsy thing. They set up a FaceTime exhibit, a portal between New York City and Dublin in Ireland, where you could 24 hours a day, see through to the other side. It's kind of neat, right? Like connecting people across the world, showing we're not that different. I think it's kind of cool. And within weeks, it's been shut down because people are trolls and don't know how to act. Here's an update.
Did we see this coming?
No, please.
Kind of did.
Yeah.
The portal has closed temporarily, and it's all because people be acting up.
It hasn't even been a week. The art installation in Flatiron just opened last Wednesday.
Yeah. And people on both sides started flashing the live video feed, flipping each other off, showing inappropriate images, and generally just causing a mess of trouble. There is security on site 24/7 and barriers to keep people from getting too close, but clearly that's not enough of a deterrent. The portal's team says it's working with its partners in Dublin to limit misbehavior appearing on the live stream. They expect to have it back on by the end of the week.
That's right. Because of flashers and people showing 9/11 pictures, this portal had to be shut down shortly after opening. Y'all, this is why we can't have nice things. People just do not know how to act anymore. Bruh. All right, well, speaking of people who don't know how to act anymore, we have to check in on the ongoing anti-Israel protests sweeping college campuses because near me at the University of Michigan, they just hit a honestly dangerous and disturbing new extreme. So y'all know I'm a hardcore free speech guy. I support whether you're super pro-Israel or super anti-Israel, whatever. I support your right to speak your mind, express your opinion, even if offends people, upsets people, even if some people think it's hate speech. I'm here for your free speech rights all day. But some of these woke protesters are now invading people's private property and going to their homes in the middle of the night. We've got footage here that shows the protesters going to the home in the late hours of the night or very early morning, depending how you look at it, of one of the University of Michigan Board of Regents members to protest on their front lawn, bringing with them fake corpses, bloodied sheets, and lists of demands.
Today is Nakba Day, a day that marks 76 years since the mass displacement of the Palestinian people to establish the settler colonial Zionist state. Sarah Hubbard, you and the remainder of the regents have not had the basic human decency to meet with us yet at the encampment, where we have been stationed for over 23 days, calling upon you to divest from death. Instead of meeting with us, the students who have been losing their loved ones for the last 7 months, and with a coalition of 100 student organizations, you have instead cackled and laughed in our faces at a protest where students were brutally beaten, pepper sprayed, and arrested. As you have refused to come to the encampment, we are now bringing the encampment to you. Likewise, each Board of Regents has received a copy of our demands taped to their doors this morning. We are giving the regents until the end of their meeting on May 16th to respond to our communication.
No matter where you land on this cause, we should all be able to agree that this is a crazy and unhinged escalation. We'll get into it in more depth, but first, here's some details from reporting from Fox News. In a news release, the University of Michigan said more than 30 student protesters staged demonstrations at the private residences of at least one Board of Regents member and went to several other residences. The protesters placed tents and fake corpses wrapped in bloodied sheets on the lawn, marched and chanted in the early morning, and posted lists of demands on doors. Protesters hid their identities with masks. On social media, the university's chapters of Jewish Voice for Peace, Students Allied for Freedom and Equality, and Transparency, Accountability, Humanity, Reparations, Investment, Resistance, Coalition took credit for the demonstrations. The same groups were responsible for organizing the anti-Israel encampment on the university's central campus Diag, school officials said. The university said the protesters began to disperse after law enforcement arrived on the scene. From the other reporting that I've seen, no arrests were made. We'll come back to that. Here's a Twitter thread from Jordan Acker, one of the other Board of Regents members, that he recounts his experience with the protesters. Around 4:40 a.m., a masked intruder came to the door of my family's home with a list of demands, including defunding the police. Good to see they're staying on topic. My 3 daughters were asleep in their beds and thankfully unaware of what transpired. This form of protest is not peaceful. Public officials should not be subject to this sort of intimidating conduct, and this behavior is unacceptable from any Michigan community member, especially one led by someone who called for the death of people they disagree with. I completely agree that this is unacceptable. Protest in public spaces all you want to get your message across, to advocate for the cause you believe in, and do all of that. That is your right. But invading people's private property and going to their homes in the middle of the night with demands, bloodied sheets, and fake corpses isn't free speech. It's intimidation, it's trespassing, and it's a crime. But of course, when the police came, it was dispersed, but no arrests were made. So expect the insanity to continue. How can anybody think this approach is healthy or constructive or even in any way beneficial to the cause of the Palestinian people? There are so many innocent people in the Gaza Strip who we should all have empathy and compassion for. But this isn't helping. This is making you look crazy. And at this point, these protests have become a sideshow, distracting attention away from the actual war. Plus, the demands these activists are making are totally unhinged and unreasonable and have basically nothing to do with actually helping the people in Gaza. Funding the police, really? The f*** does that have to do with Gaza and the Israel war? So I guess I can see why they want the police defunded, because they're out here openly doing crimes and posting videos of themselves doing it. And the whole push of the campaign is for these campuses to divest from Israel. Regardless, again, of your broader feelings on the conflict, this push doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because most of these colleges don't really have direct investments in Israel, or especially not Israel's government or military. As the Detroit News reports, pro-Palestinian students and activists have been lobbying the university to divest from its $17.9 billion endowment any funds from Israeli companies. So I'll stop you right there. If they did have some investments in, say, an Israeli candy manufacturer, why should they divest from them? What does that have to do with the war? If they were saying divest from companies that make weapons for the Israeli military or something, maybe I could see the thought process, but that's not even it. More importantly, though, they don't even have any direct investments in Israeli companies. Regent Michael Bem said that after hearing numerous requests for divestment, he asked UM's endowment managers and learned that UM has, quote, no direct investment in any Israeli company. He also disputed what divestment activists say the UM has invested in Israel. In actuality, less than 0.1% of the endowment is invested indirectly in such companies, Bem said. So what that means is that they probably have a good chunk of money invested in some form of index funds, and a tiny piece here or there is traceable back to an Israeli company. But you can't just cut that out, right? You would have to just take all your money out of those general index funds, which is totally unfeasible and also would have negligible impact and make no difference whatsoever to the Israeli economy or let alone the war. It's all just so stupid and counterproductive. I'll defend their free speech rights till I turn blue in the face, to be clear, but I'll never defend these insane tactics, and I will point out when their demands don't actually make any sense or do anything to help the people they say they care about. What's unfolding in Gaza is undoubtedly a humanitarian catastrophe. We should all care. We should all send our hearts and our sympathies out to the innocent people caught up on either side of this conflict. But this kind of madness cannot be tolerated. What do you guys think? That's just my take. Let me know in the comments below what you think. I look forward to hearing from you because I know I have people who follow me from a good place of good faith who have pretty strong feelings on either side of this conflict. But I hope we can all come together and say that we shouldn't be going to people's homes in the middle of the night, and that we're not actually helping any cause by making unreasonable demands that are unrelated or don't make much actual sense. Want to hear from you, so do let me know. Now, let's check in on President Biden, because old Uncle Joe just told a whopper so big, that even CNN had to correct him on it. In an interview with Yahoo Finance, Biden repeated the false claim that inflation was already at 9% when he took office. Take a look.
I think inflation has gone slightly up. It was at 9% when I came in, and it's now down around 3%.
No.
But the fact is that I think people are just uncertain. And that's why we got to be steady, stay the course, and continue to produce these incredible jobs. And by the way, the pay for the jobs are outpacing the inflation rate they're paying.
I'll take blatant lies for 300, Alex. And no, Biden didn't misspeak here because he's made the same claim that inflation was at 9% when he took office in multiple other interviews. But it's objectively false. You don't have to take my word for it. This was so bad that even CNN fact-checked him on it. Facts first. Biden's claim that the inflation rate was 9% when he became president is not close to true. The year-over-year inflation rate in January 2021, the month of his inauguration, was about 1.4%. Biden-era inflation rate did peak at about 9.1%, but that peak occurred in June 2022, after Biden had been president for more than 16 months. The March 2024 inflation rate, the most recent available at the time Biden made these comments, was about 3.5%. Up from about 3.2% the month prior. It's just literally not correct, and it's not even particularly close. This graph from the New York Post really shows you how inflation went soaring after Biden took office, and then it has come back down, but it's still significantly elevated above pre-pandemic levels. There's just no defending this objectively untrue statement. Biden's press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, did her best to do so.
2 times over the past 2 weeks, the president said inflation was 9% when he came into office. Is the president misleading Americans on that, or does he just not realize that inflation was 1.4%?
So, you know, and thank you for the question, because I know that we got a lot of incoming on this yesterday. And look, what the president was, the point that he was making is that the factors that caused inflation was in place when he walked into the administration, when he took office. As you know, the pandemic caused inflation around the world to be by disrupting our economy and breaking our supply chains. As you know, we had to act quickly on dealing with the supply chain. He put together a task force. You saw the president do that.
So Karine Jean-Pierre, the press secretary, actually did a good job of deflecting here. She decided to instead defend a different claim that Biden didn't say and isn't the one being asked about, that the factors that contributed to inflation were in place when he took office. But no, babe, that is not what he said, and we all have eyes and ears and can see that he said something very specific and very different, that the inflation rate was 9%. He used a specific number when he took office. And that's just not true. So you can't just pivot to a different claim that he maybe should have made instead and defend that instead. This is why if somebody who I'm aligned with ever gets elected into the White House and they called me up and they asked me to be their press secretary, I'd be honored, but I think I would have to say no. Because the level of shameless lying and gaslighting and self-debasement that you have to engage in from that podium is just jaw-dropping. It really degrades the individual and their soul, I think it must, to do this. Now, if the president had actually said that, well, the factors that contributed to inflation were already taking place before I took office, that would be a decent defense, a decent talking point. Like, we could at least talk about that. Because to be clear, inflation isn't all Biden's fault. It did happen in other countries. It was affected by supply chains. And the single biggest factor was monetary policy, the decisions made by the Federal Reserve, which Biden doesn't have direct control over. They chose to print trillions of dollars out of thin air and inject them into the economy, which, when you have more dollars chasing the same amount of goods or a shrinking amount of goods, prices go up. And the massive stimulus spending further contributed to this, but to be fair to Biden, that did begin under Trump. Biden did go on to sign another huge stimulus bill shortly after taking office that even liberal analysts acknowledge worsened inflation. I'm happy to acknowledge the nuances here, and I will absolutely acknowledge that it's not all Biden's fault the way that Republicans want to make it out to be. It's not true. Presidents in American politics do tend to be blamed for anything that happens under their watch, but economics and the economy is complicated, and there's almost never one factor that totally explains a complicated phenomenon. But I will not be gaslit, and I will not stand for him insisting something over and over again that is not true. It's an insult to all of our intelligence, and you know it's bad when even liberal media outlets like CNN that often carry water for Biden just have to correct the record. But what do you guys think? Are you buying Biden's excuses, or do you blame him for inflation? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious for your thoughts. Now it's time for DELULU Epidemic, my segment where I spotlight people who are letting their stupid show. Today, this man says that if you don't drink alcohol, you can't be trusted. If a man won't share a drink with you, you cannot trust him. I don't care about your reformed alcoholic stories, nerd. It's about participation. It's about humility. It's about being part of my team. It's about sacrifice and commitment. These nerds will never understand. Ever since Twitter enacted this pay per clicks or per views revenue style, you keep seeing these ridiculous, absurd takes that I genuinely just think people are posting as engagement bait to make money. The idea that not drinking alcohol makes somebody untrustworthy is ridiculous. It's just a choice. There are many things that determine a person's credibility and trustworthiness outside of that. And how does drinking alcohol show humility or sacrifice and commitment? What? This man's math is not mathing. Maybe I'm biased on this because I don't really drink, and that is a personal choice I've made, yet I still think I'm trustworthy. I don't think I'm somehow sketchy or unreliable because of that. But for me, this falls into the weird category of red pill Twitter, and they're just seemingly bizarre constant takes about men and masculinity that just seem untethered from reality. But what do I know? I'm just a nerd who will never understand. Up next, it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my segment where I react to the takes that are going viral on the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slug.
Make sure you're subscribed and don't forget to hit that like button. And now, let's check out this video where a woman is very upset about a microaggression at her gym class.
I just left the gym class where the male fitness instructor spent the whole time calling the group class ladies.
Hard.
No! I am the Hulk! This wasn't even the worst part. I am not there to get my beach body for Ibiza. And yes, that is a direct quote. At one point, he was like, yeah, keep doing these reps and you'll get a flat stomach. Did you know that anatomically, most ladies cannot have a flat stomach? However many reps we do of this thing, I will never have a flat stomach because most ladies, because you keep calling us ladies, we have uteruses. Uterus pops out. Also, what is wrong with not having a flat stomach? I don't go to these classes to look skinny. That is not the aim of every woman's life. I am at this class because I want better heart health. I want the endorphins. I want to be fitter. I want to be stronger. In fact, I want to be strong enough to fight you the next time you say that this bad lad ain't already a beach body. You plonker.
She seems stable. Now, look, I actually think she has a point about the flat stomach thing. Like, we shouldn't be pushing unrealistic expectations on women, and the idea that they could ever achieve, like, a flat six-pack stomach the way that a lot of men have is unrealistic for most women. I know some women can, but for most women's body types, that is unrealistic. And so maybe the instructor shouldn't have said that specifically. But first off, there's nothing wrong with him calling you ladies. Like, build a bridge and get over it, Cupcake. Like, if that's the biggest problem you have in the world, you must have a pretty darn sweet, nice, and comfortable life. He would call a group of guys. Like, what? Get over yourself. And secondly, for a fitness instructor to talk about people wanting a beach body, wanting to look slim and good, maybe that's not perfectly tailored to you specifically and your goals, but yes, most people going to a gym class want to look good. That's just the reality, babe. So there's nothing wrong with a gym instructor or a fitness instructor using what he knows most of the people that he's working with, what he knows most of their motivation is, to motivate them. In fact, that's just him doing his job. So while I get that this chick was in part trying to be funny or humorous or whatever, to get all worked up like this over something like this just makes you look out of touch and unreasonable. But hey, that's just my take. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And now, before we wrap up today's episode, I'll read a few of the comments you left on yesterday's show. One person writes, a lot of these teachers in these TikTok videos seem to have issues with boundaries. They're not necessarily malicious, just not able to maintain appropriate personal/professional boundaries. Them posting on TikTok is also probably a sign of that too. Yeah, that sounds about right to me. I think most of these TikTok teachers, like the one we covered yesterday, do seem to have a good heart and be coming from a good place, but there does seem to be a lack of maturity or a lack of clear boundaries in the adult-child relationship that really should be better established. Another person writes, I'm not the first person to say this. I don't always agree with you, but I always love you. Oh, thank you. And you know what? Kudos to all the people who follow me who don't agree with some of the things I have to say, but stick around anyway. I appreciate y'all. I really do. Another person writes, when I saw the FBI warning in the video title, my first thought was, oh shit, they finally came for him. No, I'm not being targeted by the FBI yet, but I guess if my takes critical of the government get popular enough and I blow up to YouTube stardom one day, maybe I'll have to worry about that. But for now, I'm probably too inconsequential for them to really bother. Another person writes, love it, Brad. Keep it up. You are a fun way to get my DELULU in. Thanks, I guess. Although I hope it's the people I'm reacting to that are getting your DELULU in and that I'm not the one who's giving you the DELULU. But either way, I'll take it if it gets you watching. Another person says, hey, Brad, I've been watching your videos for a while and thanks to you, mastered my English oral exam just by watching. I'm not a native English speaker. I really enjoy watching them. That is so awesome. First off, congrats and kudos to you. I'm so impressed by people who can speak two languages because I studied Spanish for years, including in college, and could never get more than conversational. And I'd never even thought that some people would be watching my videos or using them to learn like that. And that's so cool. So thank you for sharing and congrats on doing so well on your test. Another person writes, sorry, not meaning to correct you, LOL. I'm a New Yorker from Eastern Long Island. Just want to let you know because I've heard you say this once before, but the capital of New York, Albany, is pronounced Albany. Love you, Brad. Yeah, a couple people pointed this out and I actually appreciate it. I don't mind being corrected on pronunciation or something because I'd rather learn so I don't repeat the mistake when I'm on TV or something and look stupid. So I'll be sure to remember that it is Albany, not Albany. Another person writes, hey Brad, what Dr. Phil episode were you on? Just noticed the clip in your intro. So, OGs will remember this. I was actually on an episode a couple years ago called Boomers vs. Zoomers, because I am a member of Gen Z, and I represented a Gen Z perspective on that panel. I'll actually put a link. I did post the full episode on my YouTube channel. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Another person comments, your title isn't extreme enough. And they recommended normal gay watches speed get bit by a woke dog. I can't tell if this person is a hater or a fan, but either way, they actually, that's funny. You got me there. You did. Like that's, yeah, I know my titles can be over the top and ridiculous, but I also say, don't hate the player, hate the game. Another person asks, how many times can you say LGBTQIA+ without messing up? I accept your challenge. LGBTQIA+, 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 LGBTQI+, oh, what'd I do? 5, 6? I feel like that's pretty good. This is why they need to stop adding freaking letters. At this point, I just call it the Wi-Fi password community. All right, everybody, that is it for today's episode of Brad versus Everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. And yes, don't forget to hit that like button. And do consider leaving a comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments and I pick a few to respond to on every show. With that, we'll talk again tomorrow.